In our last episode, we began taking care of maintenance items and little fixes in order to make our now sparkly clean Galant roadworthy again. Now it's time to finish up those maintenance items so we can hit the road, visit a few car shows, and enjoy our revitalized Japanese classic. I mentioned this in part 1 of this video, but as a reminder, these fixes were going on at the same time that I was detailing the Galant inside and out. I decided to split these fix-ups and maintenance items into a separate video to keep from jumping around too much. Our first order of business was to put the old beast up on the lift and give it a complete inspection. This car was always taken care of and maintained well by its original owners, but when buying an older car like this, especially one that contains many complicated systems like all-wheel drive, four-wheel steering, and four-wheel anti-lock brakes, it's best to give the car a thorough inspection and look everything over for yourself. A lift is a great luxury for this and gives you the best view of the undercarriage, but a good set of jack stands will do just fine. I like to use a vehicle inspection checklist so I don't overlook anything. There are many great free examples on the internet. After spending a few hours checking everything from suspension components to fuel lines to drivetrain parts, I found this car to be in great mechanical condition. That said, some items were worn and in need of repair, like the struts. I believe they're original. While I was happy with most everything that I saw during my inspection, I discovered a handful of maintenance items that were overdue. Let's take care of those now. First up was an oil and filter change. I still remember the first time I ever changed a car's oil when I was a kid. It's a rewarding job that, as simple as it may seem, teaches you the basics of auto mechanics. Following instructions, having the proper tools, sourcing the correct parts, and practicing close attention to detail are the keys to any automotive repair, so it was a great way to learn the fundamentals back then. Changing your own oil will also allow you to inspect things and stay ahead of any potential issues. Check out this oil drain plug, for example. I'm sure it's original, but it's been badly chewed up by someone using the wrong size wrench on it or something. Either way, this could really cause some trouble in the future, so I ordered a new factory replacement. While the oil was draining, I checked the center bolt that holds the sandwich oil cooler in place and that the filter mounts to, as these can come loose over time, causing potentially bad oil leaks. It did need a little snugging. I usually check this at every oil change. I hadn't seen any recent documentation of the transmission, transfer case, or rear differential oils being changed recently, so that was my next task. I started by draining the transmission fluid, which looked a little dark, but thankfully had no metal particles floating around in it. After draining it completely and tightening the drain plug, I made this funnel, which fits perfectly in the tight confines of the engine bay. With the funnel in place, I grabbed a few bottles of Redline's MT90 synthetic transmission oil and filled up the gearbox with the good stuff. Synthetic transmission oil has many great benefits over conventional oils, like smoother shifting, better resistance to thermal breakdown, and an extended service life. Just do your research and get the proper viscosity and type recommended for your vehicle. The transfer case is nearby, so I removed its drain plug and let it empty out too. After it was empty, I filled it up with Redline shockproof synthetic gear oil. You can't miss its spooky, blood-like color and consistency. Ugh. Finally, I moved to the rear differential. First, I drained and inspected the old oil, then filled it up with Redline shockproof synthetic gear oil also. To make filling the transfer case and rear end easier over the years, I cleaned out an old antifreeze jug, filled it with Redline shockproof, and then screwed on a pump top with a clear hose on the end. This makes the job much easier, especially when lying on your back. After the rear differential was full, I made sure the fill plug was torqued to spec and any mess was cleaned up. When picking up an old DSM or Mitsubishi like this, knowing that the timing belt has been changed at the proper service interval is extremely important. An old worn-out timing belt, or even one that's newer but has been improperly installed, can spell huge problems and expense. In many cases, you may not have any documentation when the job was previously done. In our case, the car was overdue and it was time for a new one. I did another video in the past about timing belt basics, but to summarize, it comes down to good quality parts, the right tools, and precise instructions. Here's the parts that we'll need. I like to use all factory OEM parts, including the timing belt, camshaft oil seals, thermostat and gasket, water pipe O-ring, idler pulley, balance shaft belt and belt tensioner, hydraulic timing belt tensioner, tensioner pulley, and water pump. Since we'll have the valve cover off, replacing the cam seals, I also picked up a PCV valve, valve cover gasket kit, and a set of NGK spark plugs and wires. Next, you don't need a truckload of tools to do this job, but a good metric socket set, breaker bar, torque wrench, and timing belt tension adjustment tools will get you there. Lastly, when it comes to instructions, I like to use a combination of the factory service manual and the good old VFAQ. There are also great video tutorials, like the ones on Jafro Mobile's YouTube channel. I started the job by disconnecting the battery and draining the coolant. With the last of the coolant draining out, it was a perfect time to install a new thermostat. After removing the upper radiator hose, I started to unbolt the thermostat housing when I got a nice little surprise. Ever have that moment when you're loosening a bolt and it doesn't feel quite right?
No. Don't you quit me now!
Yep, snapped right off in the housing. Luckily I had a spare thermostat housing on hand, but I still had to make a gasket where it bolts to the cylinder head. This wasn't so bad, but it did add a good extra hour or so to the job. So where were we? Oh yeah. Next I removed the driver's side wheel. And then the splash guard. With that out of the way, you can see why many find this job daunting. The myriad of components so tightly packaged together and all so close to the frame rail. Heck, I still remember my first 4G63 timing belt job back in the late 90s. It was intimidating. But as complicated and cramped as that may look, there's plenty of room for the job once you follow the proper disassembly steps. My next task was to support the engine under the oil pan with a jack. To keep from damaging the pan, I used plenty of thick cardboard. With the engine supported from the bottom, I removed the brackets and then bolts that free up the motor mount. Next, we unbolt the power steering pump from its mounting bracket and set it aside, leaving the lines attached. I'd already removed the upper timing belt cover, crank pulley, and accessory belts, so next is the lower timing cover. As with any complex multi-step job like this, keep track of your hardware in its specific location. Also be sure to inspect your crank pulley, as they have been known to come apart. You can see this one starting to do so here. To prevent this, I'll replace it with the new factory Mitsubishi one. It's cheap insurance to prevent a huge failure down the road. With the timing covers out of the way, we have our first good look at the timing belt routing and the various components that quietly do their thing for tens of thousands of miles. From the top you can see the two big camshaft sprockets, the idler pulley, water pump, and tensioner pulley. Looking up from the bottom, we can see the crank sprocket, oil pump sprocket, timing belt tensioner, and then the balance shaft sprocket, belt, and tensioner assembly under that. Next, using the crank bolt, I turned the engine over by hand to get everything lined up and at top dead center. Proper alignment of all the sprockets is essential, so take your time and follow your instructions closely. You do not want to have to do this job again. Now I can use my special tool to compress the hydraulic tensioner, which relieves the tension on the timing belt, allowing us to remove it. From there we can remove the crank sprocket, which allows us to change out the balance belt assembly. Now that we have everything disassembled, this would usually be the time where I show you how to put everything back together. But unfortunately, this is the last of the timing belt job that I have to show you. I recorded the entire reassembly process with great care, replacing cam seals, installing the water pump, tensioning the balance and timing belts, and so on. Yep, I recorded all day long in the garage. Near the end of the day, I popped open the camera to see how much battery I had left when this strange message appeared. Check SD card. How the heck do you check one of these things anyway? Let's see, repair now. Oh yes, great. Yes, please repair. Thank you. Wait, what? You never said anything about deletion. It was repair, not delete. Repair failed. Oh man, nothing good can come of this cryptic message. Confusion became denial, then quickly turned into rage. I tried to recover it all, but the SD card had somehow become corrupt. At first I wanted to smash it with a hammer, but you know, it's kind of hard to get mad at such a cute little piece of technology. Corrupt or not.
I can't do it.
So let's jump to the part where I get a new SD card and got to filming. Since I had the valve cover off, it was a good time to give it a fresh coat of paint, and you've actually seen me do this in the engine bay detail video.
Don't be a dummy like Tom. Get your valve cover powder coated by Justin at Detective Coating. It'll look way better and it'll last longer. See ya.
Who was that? Anyway. With the valve cover finished and bolted back on, I took out the old spark plugs and put in a new set of NGK plugs and wires. They were due for a replacement. When doing overlapping tasks like this over the span of days or even weeks, I like to write notes for myself so I won't forget anything. I keep a punch list on the windshield of the car so there's no missing it, and in this case stuck a note on the oil cap that read "No oil" in bold letters. I probably wouldn't forget to add oil, but a little extra reminder never hurts. Older 4G63 engines are legendary for their idle issues. Who here has heard this before? The Galant had a very high cold idle that would then surge when warmed up. I thought I was going to be in for a long, treacherous journey tracking this down, but I completely lucked out when a simple BIS O-ring fixed it. Yes! Thanks for watching. The next time you see the Galant, we'll begin our journey to create the car I've always wanted to build. A 100% stock appearing and sounding street sleeper. Until then, come on over to my Facebook page to say hello and send me some pictures of what you're working on. I always love seeing what y'all are cooking up in your garage. So with that said, thanks again folks, and we'll see you next time.